In 2014, this woman was worth $4.5 billion. Forbes called her the youngest, self-made female billionaire on the planet. She wore the black turtleneck. She spoke in a low, certain voice. And she promised she was going to change medicine forever with a single drop of blood. There was just one problem. The machine at the center of it all didn't work. Not worked, sometimes. Not wasn't ready yet. It did not work. And she knew. Today, we're putting Theranos on the table, a $9 billion company built on a technology that never actually existed. And the question isn't just how it fell apart. It's how it fooled two former secretaries of state, a four-star general, a media mogul, and hundreds of millions of dollars for more than 10 years. Let's begin the autopsy. To understand how a college dropout convinced some of the most powerful people in America, you have to go back to 2003 to a 19-year-old who was, of all things, terrified of needles. Elizabeth Holmes had wanted to be successful for as long as she could remember. As a child, she reportedly wrote that she wanted to be a billionaire. Not a president, not a movie star. A billionaire. She grew up ambitious, intense, and absolutely certain she was going to do something enormous. At Stanford, she found her something enormous. She hated needles, most people do, and she became fixated on a beautiful idea. What if you never needed the big needle again? What if a single prick of your finger, one tiny drop of blood, could run hundreds of medical tests? Cheaper, faster, painless, from a little machine sitting in every pharmacy in the country. It was the kind of idea that could genuinely make the world better early cancer detection, testing for people who could never afford it. Who wouldn't want that to be real? So at 19, Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford, took the money her parents had saved for her education, and started a company. She first called it Real-Time Cures, then renamed it Theranos, a blend of the words therapy and diagnosis. And she set out to build the device that would do it all, a sleek black box she named the Edison, after the great inventor himself. The pitch was intoxicating in its simplicity. One tiny drop of blood, pricked painlessly from your finger, dropped into a little cartridge, slotted into the Edison, and out would come results for dozens, even hundreds, of tests, cholesterol, infections, cancer markers, in minutes, for a fraction of what a normal lab charged. No giant needles, no waiting days for results, no fear. It was medicine reimagined as something gentle and instant. On paper, it was gorgeous. Here's the thing everyone agrees on about Elizabeth Holmes. She was magnetic. She could walk into a room full of billionaires and make them feel like they were watching the future arrive. She modeled herself on Steve Jobs right down to the black turtleneck, the obsessive secrecy, and that famous unblinking stare. She spoke about her mission like it was a calling, not a business. And people believed her. The money started coming in. And then, something remarkable happened. The legends came in with it. Theranos raised money not from cautious medical experts, but from famous names who wanted a piece of the future. The venture capitalist Tim Draper, Oracle founder Larry Ellison, the family behind Walmart, the family of Betsy DeVos, and the media mogul Rupert Murdoch, who personally put in around $125 million. In total, Theranos raised more than $700 million from investors. But the real magic trick was the board of directors. Elizabeth Holmes assembled a board that looked less like a startup and more like a war cabinet. Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, another former Secretary of State, former Defense Secretary, William Perry, Senator Sam Nunn, and General James Mattis. Titans of American power, and almost none of them with any real background in laboratory medicine. When a company is guarded by names like that, people stop asking hard questions. Who's going to fact-check Henry Kissinger? Before we open this one up, any further subscribe and hit the bell. Because on this channel, no fortune is too big to end up on this table. And trust me, the cause of death here is never the one you'd guess. By 2013, Theranos stepped out of the shadows and into your neighborhood. It signed a deal with the pharmacy giant Walgreens to put Theranos wellness centers right inside its stores. The grocery chain Safeway poured around $350 million into a similar plan, retrofitting hundreds of stores. Real customers were about to walk in and get real medical results from these machines. And the hype went supernova. Holmes landed on the cover of Fortune, then Forbes. She made the Time 100 list of the most influential people in the world. The Vice President of the United States visited her lab and praised it as the laboratory of the future. She gave interviews, keynotes, magazine profiles, the young genius who was going to save us all. At its peak, in 2013 and 2014, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Holmes owned about half of it, making her, on paper, worth roughly $4.5 billion. She was the most celebrated entrepreneur in the world. It was a perfect story. Beautiful, world-changing, and blessed by legends. And almost none of it was true. Here is the secret buried at the very center of Theranos. The one thing all that money, all those famous names, and all that adoration were stacked on top of. The Edison could not do what she said it could. The dream was hundreds of tests from a single drop of blood. The reality? The device could reliably run only a tiny handful of tests, and even those, badly. Blood is complicated, and a single drop is a very small amount to work with. To stretch those tiny fingerstick samples across many tests, Theranos diluted them, which threw the results off even more. The machine was slow, inaccurate, and nowhere near safe enough to touch a real patient. Insiders would later describe results that swung wildly, machines that failed quality checks, and readings no doctor should ever trust. There was a deeper problem, too. Squeezing blood from a finger prick isn't the same as drawing it from a vein. The tiny sample can get contaminated by fluid and burst cells, skewing the numbers before a test even begins. Theranos never truly solved that. Its later machine, sometimes called the Mini Lab, didn't fix it either. The fundamental promise, hundreds of accurate tests from one small drop, simply wasn't something the company could deliver. So the company did something extraordinary to hide it. Behind the closed doors of the lab, Theranos ran most of its actual blood work, not on the miracle Edison, but on ordinary, commercially bought analyzers made by other companies. The very machines every normal lab already used. The revolution that was supposed to replace the old technology was, in secret, completely dependent on it. And when important investors came to visit and wanted a demonstration? According to later reporting and trial testimony, the demos were stage managed. A VIP would give a fingerstick sample. The sample would be whisked away, and the result would quietly be produced by a commercial machine in the back, while software allegedly hid error messages, so the Edison looked like it was humming along perfectly. The guests left dazzled. They had just watched a magic trick and mistaken it for science. Now, why didn't anyone on the inside just shout the truth? Because inside Theranos, the walls were high and the doors were locked. Employees were divided into silos and forbidden from comparing notes. They signed aggressive non-disclosure agreements. They were watched, and at the center of that fear was a man named Ramesh Balwani, known as Sunny Holmes' second-in-command and, secretly, her romantic partner. Prosecutors would later describe a climate of intimidation where doubting the technology was a fast way to lose your job. But secrets this big are heavy, and two young employees couldn't carry it. One was Erica Chung, a recent college graduate who watched the company's own quality control checks fail again and again, and then watched those failures get waved through and ignored. The other was Tyler Schultz. And Tyler was not just anybody. He was the grandson of George Shultz, the former Secretary of State who sat on the Theranos board and adored Elizabeth Holmes. Tyler saw exactly what Erica saw. Numbers that didn't add up, a machine no one should trust with a human life. He emailed Elizabeth Holmes directly to raise his concerns. What he got back was not gratitude. It was Theranos lawyers. Legal threats. He was pressured and, by his account, followed. His family reportedly spent hundreds of thousands of dollars defending him. And for a long, painful stretch, his own grandfather chose the company and Elizabeth Holmes over him. Quick question. While the body's still on the table, if you had been on that board, sitting next to Henry Kissinger, would you have seen through it? Or would those legendary names have convinced you too? Tell me in the comments, because what these two young people did next is the exact moment this whole empire started to die. Erica and Tyler took what they knew to a reporter, an investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal named John Carreyrou. And Carreyrou started pulling on the thread. He tracked down former employees. He examined the science. Theranos fought back hard, reportedly hiring the famous attorney David Boies to pressure the newspaper and intimidate its sources into silence. It didn't work. On the 15th of October 2015, the Wall Street Journal published the story that broke the spell. Theranos was barely using its own devices, and the technology did not do what the world had been told. The reality distortion field flickered, and then it went dark. Once the truth was out in the open, the fall was brutal, and it was fast. In early 2016, Federal health regulators inspected the Theranos lab and found conditions so dangerous they used a specific, chilling phrase, immediate jeopardy, to patient health and safety. Think about what that means. Real people, making real decisions about their bodies, whether to worry, whether to medicate, whether to panic based on results from a machine the company knew could not be trusted. And this is where the story stops being about money. According to later reporting, some patients received results that were simply wrong. People were told their blood signaled a serious problem when it didn't. At least one pregnant woman was reportedly given a frightening reading that suggested she might be losing her pregnancy. Others were handed alarming numbers on conditions that could send anyone spiraling, all from a device that couldn't back them up. A wrong blood test isn't a wrong stock tip. It can change what a doctor does to your body. That was the true cost of the lie. Theranos was forced to throw out 2 years of results from its Edison devices and issue tens of thousands of corrected reports. Later that year, regulators revoked the lab's license and banned Holmes from operating a lab for 2 years. Then the dominoes fell, one after another. Walgreens cut ties and shut down the wellness centers, then sued the company. Safeway's deal was already dead. And Forbes, the same magazine that had crowned her, publicly recalculated Elizabeth Holmes's net worth from $4.5 billion to zero. Not a smaller number. Zero. The paper fortune had never really existed. The investors were wiped out. Rupert Murdoch reportedly sold his stake back for a single dollar, just to claim the loss on his taxes. His $125 million gone. In March 2018, the Securities and Exchange Commission charged Holmes with what it called massive fraud. She settled. She paid a penalty, gave up voting control of her company, and was barred from leading a public company for years. Then came the part no settlement could fix. In June 2018, federal prosecutors indicted Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani on criminal fraud charges. And on the 4th of September 2018, Theranos told its investors it was shutting down for good. The $9 billion company died owing money. But the autopsy still wasn't finished. The United States government put Elizabeth Holmes on trial, and the case became a national spectacle. She took the witness stand in her own defense. She argued she had truly believed in Theranos, that failure was not the same thing as fraud, and, in emotional testimony, she alleged that Sunny Balwani had been controlling and abusive toward her over their years together, a claim he firmly denied. Whether the jury saw a true believer or a con artist was the question that hung over the entire trial. It stretched across months of testimony. And on the 3rd of January 2022, the jury delivered its verdict, guilty on 4 counts of defrauding investors. On the charges related to patients, they acquitted her. On 3 other counts, they couldn't agree. On the 18th of November 2022, she was sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. Sunny Balwani, tried separately, was convicted on all 12 counts against him and sentenced to nearly 13 years. Together, they were ordered to pay $452 million in restitution. And on the 30th of May 2023, the woman once called the next Steve Jobs walked into a federal prison camp in Texas. Theranos left a scar on Silicon Valley. For years, the unofficial motto of startups had been, "Fake it till you make it, Project Confidence, promise the moon, and let reality catch up later." Theranos took that idea to its logical, terrifying endpoint, faking a medical device that real patients bled into. The word Theranos became shorthand for the moment a good story outran the truth. Investors got more careful. Regulators got more curious. And a generation of founders learned that in some industries, fake it till you make it isn't ambition, it's a felony. Here's the strangest part of this whole autopsy. Theranos didn't die because the dream was stupid. A single drop of blood running your entire health panel that is still a future worth chasing. It died because Elizabeth Holmes sold that dream as if it were already real, to people who wanted it to be true so badly that they forgot to check whether it was. Cause of death. A story too good to verify. Everyone played a part. The investors who skipped the science because the board was so impressive. The board members who lent their names without ever looking under the hood. The magazines that printed the legend. And the customers who trusted a black box with their blood. Wanting something to be true, that is exactly how the smartest people in the room end up lying on this table. So tell me, whose fortune should we autopsy next? Leave the name in the comments. Because on this channel, the money is always already on the table.